The afternoon sun illuminated the impeccable gardens of the mansion in Bel Air, a prestigious region of Los Angeles. Roderick Vance observed the panoramic city view through enormous floor-to-ceiling tempered glass windows. His construction empire had revolutionized modern architecture in the United States, with buildings that shaped the Los Angeles skyline. At 38, he was the country's most influential entrepreneur, owner of Vance Enterprises, with an estimated net worth in the billions. But on that autumn afternoon, as he adjusted the gold watch on his wrist, his gaze did not reflect success. There was a persistent shadow, an emptiness that no bank account could fill. The crying of Raphael, his one-year-old son, echoed through the mansion's corridors. It was the only sound that broke the oppressive silence of that place. "Sir," the child won't stop crying. Josephine, the housekeeper, a gray-haired woman who had worked for the family for decades, entered the office with a worried expression. "It's the third nanny this month. I don't know what else to do." Roderick took a deep breath, adjusting his tie. "Hire another one, and this time check their background more carefully. I don't want another opportunist in this house." Josephine hesitated before replying. "Sir, with all due respect, perhaps the problem isn't with the employees. The child misses—" "Don't tell me what my son misses," Roderick interrupted, his tone icy. "Just do as I say." Alone again, he walked to a shelf where a silver photo frame rested. In it, the luminous smile of Caroline, his wife. They had met in architecture school. She, the daughter of university professors, he heir to the Vance empire. Against all expectations, they fell in love. Caroline abandoned her career to support her husband's meteoric rise, but she never stopped drawing. Her sketchbooks were kept in a room Roderick kept locked. The entrepreneur touched the photograph with his fingertips, feeling anger grow. A year ago, when Raphael was born, Caroline passed away due to childbirth complications. The trauma of that day still tormented him. Since then, he had become a different person, cold, distrustful, unable to connect even with his own son. Upstairs, the baby continued to cry. Roderick climbed the stairs slowly, like someone walking to a sentence. The nursery, decorated in shades of blue and white, was worthy of a decor magazine. Imported toys, exclusive design furniture, a perfect environment, except for the fact that it lacked love. Raphael was in his crib, his little face red from crying so much. Seeing his father, he stretched out his tiny arms, asking to be held. Roderick picked him up awkwardly, unsure how to calm the child. The boy had eyes identical to his mother's, large, expressive, a golden brown that seemed to see beyond appearances. "What do you want, Raphael?" "Tell Daddy." But Raphael only cried more, squirming in his father's arms. Frustrated, Roderick placed him back in the crib. "I'm no good at this," he murmured, running a hand through his impeccably combed hair. That night, in his office, surrounded by spreadsheets and contracts, Roderick recalled the past few months. 5 employees fired in a row. The first, caught rummaging through confidential documents. The second, making videos inside the mansion to sell to gossip sites. The third, stealing priceless jewelry that belonged to Caroline. The fourth, neglecting the baby while talking for hours on the phone. The fifth, a young woman newly graduated in pedagogy, had been fired the previous week after Roderick found a notepad where she recorded details of the family's routine, schedules, habits, information that could be sold to competitors or, worse, used for kidnappings. The phone rang, pulling him from his dark thoughts. It was Marcus Lane, his lawyer, and the only friend left from his college days. "Rod, I found an agency specializing in professionals for high-net-worth families. They have a promising candidate. Pediatric nursing background, experience with special needs children, impeccable references. Send the full dossier. I'll review it." The next day, Josephine announced the new candidate's arrival. Roderick watched through the security camera at the entrance as the simple car parked at the mansion gates. The woman who got out looked nothing like the previous ones. No exaggerated makeup, no high heels, no fake designer clothes. She wore a simple navy blue dress, curly hair tied in a discreet bun, and carried a worn leather bag. Priscilla Oliver, 32, born in New Orleans, Louisiana. Roderick mentally reviewed the dossier details as he went down for the interview. An orphan raised by her grandmother, she graduated with a full scholarship. She specialized in neonatal care, Her references from 3 Los Angeles families, all verified by Marcus. "Good afternoon, Mr. Vance." Her voice was soft but firm. A subtle southern accent gave musicality to her words. "Thank you for the opportunity." Roderick indicated the chair in front of him, studying every detail of the woman. Her eyes, a deep dark brown, met his gaze without hesitation. There was something disconcertingly familiar about her. "Why are you interested in this position, Ms. Oliver?" "I believe I can make a difference in your son's life, Mr. Vance." The direct answer caught him by surprise. "And how do you intend to do that?" 5 professionals tried before you." Priscilla smiled slightly. "Perhaps they were more interested in the mansion, the status, or the salary than in the child." Raphael's crying interrupted the conversation. Josephine appeared at the door, holding the baby who was squirming in her arms. "Sorry, sir." "He won't stop." Before Roderick could say anything, Priscilla stood up. "May I?" With a reluctant nod, he allowed Josephine to hand the baby to the candidate. What happened next left him astonished. Raphael, who had been crying for hours, calmed down almost immediately in Priscilla's arms. She murmured soft words, rocking him gently, and the baby not only calmed down but, for the first time in weeks, smiled. How did you do that?" Roderick asked, trying to disguise his astonishment. "I didn't do anything special. Sometimes children just need to feel safe." She looked at Raphael with genuine affection. "He has his mother's eyes." Roderick stiffened. "How do you know that?" Priscilla indicated a photo frame on the side table. "The photograph of the 3 of you at the maternity ward." He nodded, still suspicious, as he watched his son interact with this stranger as he never had before. Raphael clung to her fingers, clapping his hands when she hummed a lullaby. "You're hired," he finally said. "Josephine will show you to your room and explain the house rules." When he was alone, Roderick picked up the phone. "Marcus, I want a complete investigation into Priscilla Oliver." "Dig into everything." Medical history, relationships, debts, social media, even what she ate for breakfast in the last 5 years. There's something about this woman, something I can't decipher. That same night, as Priscilla settled into the room next to the nursery, Roderick accessed the security system on his tablet. With a few taps, he activated the newly installed cameras in every room of the house, including the new nanny's room. If she had ulterior motives, he would find out. And if she was there to harm him or his son, she would pay dearly. 3 weeks passed since Priscilla's arrival at the Vance mansion. The household routine had subtly changed. The previously silent corridors now echoed with the lullabies she sang as she carried Raphael through the gardens or played with him in the game room. The baby responded surprisingly. He smiled more, babbled attempts at words, and to everyone's astonishment, began to balance on his own legs, practicing his first steps. In the small room adjoining his office, Roderick watched the nanny's every move through the cameras scattered throughout the house. It was already dawn, but sleep wouldn't come. Something deeply troubled him. In almost a month of constant surveillance, he hadn't caught any suspicious behavior. On the contrary, Priscilla's dedication seemed genuine, almost maternal. Marcus had sent the complete investigation, no red flags. Verified resume, confirmed references, no debts, no lawsuits. The only peculiarity was the scarcity of records before the age of 18, as if Priscilla had appeared out of nowhere when she entered college. "Why can't I trust her?" Roderick murmured to himself, watching the nanny adjust the blankets in the crib where Raphael slept peacefully. The next morning, a tense meeting at Vance Enterprises. The new downtown Los Angeles project faced resistance from the city council. Investors were pressuring. Roderick maintained his impeccable posture, the serene demeanor that characterized him in business. But his mind wandered to the mansion, to the cameras he now compulsively checked on his phone. "Mr. Vance?" The CFO's voice brought him back to reality. "We need your decision on the additional capital injection." "Approved. Send the documents to my office." Roderick stood up, ending the meeting. "We'll stick to the schedule as planned." Back at the mansion, something unusual happened. Upon entering, he heard laughter coming from the living room. Raphael's crystalline sound mixed with Priscilla's melodious voice. He approached silently. The scene he found paralyzed him. Raphael, holding onto the sofa, took small steps towards the nanny, who encouraged him from her knees on the Persian rug. "Come on, Rafi. Come to Pris." The baby concentrated, took 3 steps before falling to a sitting position, letting out a giggle. Priscilla applauded, proud. "Did you see that?" she exclaimed, finally noticing Roderick's presence. "He's walking." Roderick felt a sharp pang in his chest. His son's first steps, and they weren't towards him. A milestone that should have been shared with Caroline, not with an employee. "Impressive," he replied coldly, turning to leave the room. "Mr. Vance," Priscilla called. "Why don't you try?" He'd be happy to walk to his dad. Roderick hesitated, then awkwardly knelt. Raphael looked at him curious. "Come on, Raphael," he called, struggling to soften his voice. "Come to Daddy." For a tense moment, the baby remained still. Then, smiling, he stood up, supported by the sofa, and took wobbly steps towards his father. Roderick felt his heart race as his son fell into his arms, laughing. For a fleeting instant, the ice that encased his heart seemed to melt. "Congratulations, Rafi." Priscilla clapped. "What a clever boy." That night, while monitoring the cameras, Roderick saw something that would change everything. Priscilla, believing herself alone in Raphael's room, took an old silver locket from her bag. She opened it, contemplated its contents for a few moments, and quickly put it away when Josephine entered the room. The expression on her face was nostalgic, almost reverent. Intrigued, Roderick zoomed in on the image, trying to see what was inside the locket. Without success. In the following days, he intensified his surveillance. He noticed that Priscilla always carried that object, like a talisman. 3 days later, while the nanny was bathing Raphael, it happened. The bathroom cameras captured the moment she, distracted, left the open locket on the sink counter. Roderick adjusted the zoom and finally saw an old black-and-white photograph. In it, an elderly man hugged a young woman. The man's face made his blood run cold. It was Augustus Vance, his father. "Who are you, Priscilla Oliver?" he whispered, feeling anger grow. The next day, returning from the office earlier than usual, Roderick passed through the corridor leading to the old library, a room rarely used since his father's passing 5 years ago. Voices made him stop. The door was ajar. "Look, Rafi, this was your grandfather." Priscilla's voice came from inside. "The most generous man I ever knew. And your grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor, was as elegant as she was kind." Roderick felt his blood boil. How dare she speak of his family with such intimacy? He pushed the door open, surprising Priscilla, who held Raphael in her arms, showing him an old Vance family photo album. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice controlled but laden with contained fury. Priscilla paled. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. Raphael was restless, and I thought that I don't pay you to think. I pay you to take care of my son according to my rules." He took the album from her hands. "This room is off limits to staff. I thought I made that clear. Forgive me, sir. It won't happen again. Hand Raphael over to Josephine and come to my office in 15 minutes. In the sanctuary of his office, Roderick tried to organize his thoughts. The locket with his father's photo, the knowledge about his family, the inexplicable connection with Raphael. Everything pointed to something he couldn't yet define. The wall clock struck exactly 15 minutes when Priscilla knocked on the door. She wore the same simple uniform as always, but there was a dignity in her posture that deeply irritated him. "Come in and close the door." She obeyed, standing before the imposing desk. "How long have you known my family, Miss Oliver?" The direct question seemed to catch her by surprise. Her eyes, always calm, revealed a flash of apprehension. "I don't understand, sir." Roderick stood up, circling the desk to face her closely. "I saw the locket you carry. The photograph of my father with a young woman. I heard you talking about my parents with my son." His voice hardened with each word. "So I'm asking again, who are you really? And what is your connection to my family?" Silence hung heavy for long seconds. Priscilla took a deep breath, like someone making a difficult decision. "My real name is Priscilla Oliver Santos." She looked him directly in the eye. "The woman in the photograph with your father is my mother, Antonia Santos." The revelation hit Roderick like a physical blow. Antonia, a name he hadn't heard in decades. The cook who worked for his family during his childhood. Impossible. Antonia never mentioned having children. She had 3. I'm the youngest. I was born after she stopped working for your family. Roderick walked to the window, trying to process the information. Childhood memories flooded his mind. Antonia in the kitchen of the old house, preparing cornmeal cakes he loved. Antonia telling him stories to sleep when his parents traveled. Antonia crying silently the day she had to resign. Why are you here? Revenge? Blackmail? Suspicion grew again. What do you want from my family? Priscilla's gaze hardened for the first time. Don't insult my mother's memory, Mr. Vance. She taught me to value honor above all else. Then why did you infiltrate my house under a false identity? I didn't lie about my background or experience. I just omitted my family name. Why? Priscilla hesitated. It's a long and complicated story. A story that begins long before you became the man you are today. I have all the time in the world. Roderick pointed to the chair. Sit down and start from the beginning. And know that I've already checked every detail of your past. If you lie, I'll know. She sat down slowly, adjusting her uniform. Her eyes met his without fear, only a deep sadness. My mother worked in the kitchen of the old Vance mansion in Beverly Hills. A widow, she raised my older brothers, George and Matthew, alone. I hadn't been born yet, Roderick nodded. He remembered the two boys who occasionally visited their mother on weekends. When she discovered she was pregnant again, with me, she hid the fact as long as she could. She feared losing her job. My biological father was a married man who abandoned her upon learning of the pregnancy. The story stirred hazy memories in Roderick, whispers from employees, his mother commenting on Antonia's situation. In her 8th month of pregnancy, she suffered a severe complication, hemorrhage. She needed urgent surgery but had no health insurance or money. Priscilla unconsciously touched the locket hidden under her uniform. It was your father, Mr. Augustus, who paid for the procedure. He not only covered the hospital costs, but ensured we had financial support during my early childhood. The information surprised Roderick. His father had never mentioned such an act of generosity. Your father was a reserved man, Priscilla continued, her eyes fixed on some distant point, as if revisiting old memories. Few knew his compassionate side. To the world, he was just the powerful Augustus Vance, the construction magnate. But to my family, he was an angel. Roderick shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. That image didn't match his own memories of his father. A ruthless, demanding businessman who rarely showed emotion. The locket, Priscilla continued, taking it from her neck, was a gift from him to my mother. On the day she was discharged from the hospital, inside was this photograph and an engraved message. Life always finds a way. She opened the delicate silver object. Roderick leaned in for a better look. The inscription was there in his father's unmistakable handwriting. My mother considered this object her most precious possession. When she left us 6 years ago, she asked me to always keep it with me. That explains the locket, but not why you're here, Roderick retorted, maintaining a skeptical tone. What is your true objective, Priscilla? A deep sigh preceded her answer. I've worked as a nursing assistant at St. Jude Medical Center for 8 years. I was on duty the night your wife was admitted in labor. Roderick paled. The mention of Caroline and that night made his heart clench painfully. He stood up, turning his back to hide the vulnerability that assailed him. Continue, he ordered, his voice lower. I was assigned to accompany her during the initial moments. Your wife was scared but determined. When I saw the Vance surname on her chart, something awakened in me. I asked if she had any relation to Augustus Vance. Priscilla paused. She told me between contractions that she was his wife, the daughter-in-law of the late Augustus. The world is truly small, isn't it? Roderick remained silent, absorbing that unexpected revelation. Chance had placed Priscilla beside Caroline on that fateful night. When the situation became complicated and the doctors decided on an emergency C-section, I was the last person to speak with her before the surgery. Priscilla's voice faltered for the first time. Your wife was very scared. She held my hand and said, if something happens to me, please ensure my baby is okay, that he is loved. Silent tears streamed down Priscilla's face now. Roderick felt his own throat close. He had never known Caroline's last words. I promised her I would do everything in my power. When she passed and the baby was taken to the neonatal ICU, I felt I had failed. In the following days, I tried to check on the child, but you had already transferred Raphael to a private hospital. I lost contact. Roderick turned to her, his face a mask of emotional control, although his eyes betrayed the internal storm. And then? You decided to show up a year later to fulfill the promise. It wasn't that simple. Priscilla took a deep breath. I respected your pain and your space, but I started hearing rumors. Employees fired, isolation, your estrangement from your son. When I saw the job advertisement, sent by the recruitment agency to the hospital, I recognized the opportunity. I felt it was my duty to try. Duty? Roderick laughed humorlessly. Based on a promise made to a panicked woman? Priscilla's eyes filled with determination. Based on 2 promises, Mr. Vance. One made to your wife, and another I made to my mother before she passed, to repay the generosity your family showed us, if the chance ever arose. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions. Roderick walked to the bookshelf, where he kept a bottle of rare whiskey. He poured himself a generous shot. Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning? Would you have hired me? A constant reminder of the most painful day of your life. Someone connected to your family's past in a way you didn't even fully know. Her honest answer disarmed him. No, he wouldn't have hired her. He would have seen conspiracies where none existed, as he had with the other employees. I intended to tell you eventually, Priscilla continued, when I had earned your trust. When you realized I'm only here to help Raphael, and you. Roderick drank the whiskey in one gulp, feeling the liquid burn his throat. Part of him wanted to expel her immediately, to eliminate this painful connection to the past. Another part, however, a part that had been silent for too long, recognized the sincerity in her words. The cameras, he murmured. What? I installed cameras in every room. I've been watching your every move for the past few weeks. Instead of the indignation he expected, he saw only resigned acceptance on her face. I noticed the small dots on the picture frames, the new device on the nursery ceiling. I understand your distrust, Mr. Vance. In your place, I would probably do the same. The absence of a defensive reaction confused him further. Where was the indignation, the accusation of invasion of privacy? Why did she simply understand? I want to believe you, he finally admitted, but there have been so many betrayals, so many disappointments this past year. Priscilla stood up, adjusting her uniform with dignity. I don't demand your immediate trust, sir. I only ask for the chance to continue my work with Raphael. If you wish me to leave, I will understand. But know that my motives are genuine. She walked to the door, then turned one last time. I think your father would see the beauty in this coincidence of fate. As he himself wrote in the locket, life always finds a way. After Priscilla left, Roderick remained in his office for hours, drinking slowly and revolving the past. Memories of his father, of Caroline, moments of his own childhood that he had suppressed. Finally, a decision crystallized in his mind. The next morning, he called Priscilla to the office again. She entered with a serene expression, prepared for any verdict. I've made my decision, Roderick announced, standing by the window. You stay, but with conditions. The relief on her face was visible. What conditions, sir? First, no secrets. Anything related to my son or our family's past must be shared with me immediately. I fully agree. Second, I want to know more about my father. The man you describe is almost a stranger to me. Priscilla nodded, surprised by the unexpected request. Third, he continued, I'm going to remove the cameras. All of them. This is not the environment I want for my son. A slight smile appeared on her lips. Those are fair conditions, Mr. Vance. Roderick, he corrected, extending his hand formally. You can call me Roderick. That handshake sealed a new chapter in the history of the Vance mansion. In the weeks that followed, a subtle transformation began to occur. Roderick, little by little, began to interact more with Raphael. Awkward at first, he gained confidence with Priscilla's discreet guidance. He learned to change diapers, prepare bottles, recognize his son's different cries. He discovered the simple pleasure of watching Raphael fall asleep in his arms while reading children's stories. During the evenings, after Raphael was asleep, Roderick and Priscilla sat on the veranda for conversations that stretched for hours. She shared memories from her mother about Augustus Vance, the boss who sent generous Christmas baskets, who paid for her older children's college, who cried secretly at the funeral of an old employee. My mother used to say your father had 2 hearts. Priscilla recounted one of those nights. One made of steel for business, another of marshmallow for those he loved. Roderick smiled at the image. He never showed that marshmallow side to me. Perhaps because he saw so much of himself in you. Men of that generation believed that showing tenderness to their children would make them weak. One Sunday afternoon, while playing with Raphael in the garden, Roderick received a call from Marcus. His lawyer was concerned about a possible leak of confidential company information. Someone might be selling industrial secrets to competitors. "I need you at the office immediately," Marcus insisted. "It's a critical situation." Roderick looked at Raphael, who was stacking colorful blocks under Priscilla's watchful eye. "I can't go right now, Marcus. I'm with my son." "Roderick, this is serious. Millions are at stake." There was a time when Roderick would have dropped everything for business. But something had changed. "Business will wait until tomorrow. My son won't." He hung up the phone, surprising himself with the decision. Across the garden, Priscilla observed the scene with a discreet smile. Their gazes met for an instant, a moment of silent understanding that made Roderick's heart race in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. That night, lying in his solitary bed, Roderick admitted to himself a truth he had been trying to deny. He was starting to care for Priscilla. Not as an employee nor as a connection to his past, but as a woman. The realization frightened him. Would it be disrespectful to Caroline's memory? Was he confusing gratitude with attraction? The sound of the intercom interrupted his thoughts. It was the main gate security. "Sir, there's a person here insisting on seeing Ms. Oliver, a man named George Santos. Says he's her brother." Roderick felt a chill of apprehension. Priscilla's older brother, whom she had mentioned a few times, had never appeared before. "Let him in." And called Priscilla to the living room. Minutes later, a man approximately 45 years old, with features similar to Priscilla's, entered the mansion. His face expressed urgency and concern. "Where's my sister?" he asked without ceremony. "George?" Priscilla's voice came from the corridor. She ran to hug her brother. "What happened? Why are you here so late?" The man cast a suspicious glance at Roderick before replying, "I found them. I found the documents Mom kept all these years. Letters from Mr. Augustus. You need to see this immediately." Priscilla paled. "What documents? What are you talking about?" George opened the folder he carried, pulling out yellowed envelopes. "Mom never told us the whole truth, Priscilla. About the locket, about Mr. Augustus, about you." Roderick felt his blood freeze in his veins. Something told him that what he was about to discover would forever change the course of that story. A dense silence filled the room as George spread the documents on the coffee table. Letters yellowed with time, old photographs, newspaper clippings, fragments of a past carefully preserved by Antonia Santos until her last breath. "Sit down, George," Roderick indicated the sofa, unexpectedly taking on the role of host in that tense moment. "I believe we all need to hear this story calmly." Priscilla remained standing, her eyes fixed on the documents as if afraid to touch them. "Why would Mom keep all this without ever telling us?" George ran a hand through the graying hair at his temples. "To protect you, I believe, and perhaps to protect Mr. Augustus's reputation as well." "What exactly are we talking about?" Roderick's voice sounded more apprehensive than he intended. "It's best to start from the beginning." George selected one of the letters. "This one was written by your father almost 33 years ago, Mr. Vance." Roderick immediately recognized the letterhead of the old Vance Construction Company before its international expansion. His father's elegant handwriting brought a wave of nostalgia. George began to read. "Dear Antonia, I deeply appreciate your discretion in this difficult time. Eleanor would not bear another blow after the recent loss. I assure you that your daughter will have everything she needs, even if I cannot publicly acknowledge her. What happened between us was a mistake I deeply regret, but the child is innocent and deserves all my support, even from a distance." The reading was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. Roderick had dropped the whiskey glass he was holding. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with shock. This is impossible," he stammered. Priscilla had sat down, her legs unable to support her. "What does this mean, George?" "It means, my sister, that Augustus Vance was your biological father." The revelation hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Priscilla covered her mouth with her hands, unable to process the information. Roderick staggered to the window, gasping for air. "This is absurd," he finally managed to say. "My father would never. He loved my mother unconditionally." "No one is questioning that," George replied with surprising gentleness. "But powerful men sometimes make mistakes, Mr. Vance, and your father, despite everything, was honorable enough to take responsibility, even if in secret." "It can't be true," Priscilla murmured, tears streaming freely down her face. "Mom would have told me something so important." George opened another, more recent letter. This one was written 6 months before our mother's passing. Apparently she had decided to tell the truth, but couldn't find the strength. Antonia's trembling handwriting, so different from Augustus's firm script, recounted her internal conflict. The promise made to her employer never to reveal the paternity. The fear of how the revelation would affect Priscilla. And, mainly, the concern that the news could destroy the Vance family, to whom she owed so much. "On the last page," George continued, "she explains why she kept the locket all these years. It wasn't just a symbol of gratitude, as she made you believe, Priscilla. It was the only tangible proof of the connection between you and your biological father." Roderick picked up the locket Priscilla had placed on the table. He opened it with trembling hands, observing the photograph of his father with Antonia from a new perspective. The inscription, "Life always finds a way," now took on a completely different meaning. "Are we siblings?" Roderick's voice failed on the last word, as he looked at Priscilla as if seeing her for the first time. "Half-siblings," George corrected softly. "Children of the same father." Priscilla stood up abruptly. "I need air." She walked out into the garden, her steps unsteady, her world crumbling around her. Roderick remained paralyzed, unable to fully process the revelation. Fragments of memories began to make sense. His father's special interest in Antonia and her children, the financial support that went far beyond usual generosity with employees, the indefinable resemblance he had felt upon meeting Priscilla. "Why now?" he finally asked George. "Why reveal this after so long?" George sighed deeply. "Matthew and I decided to sell our mother's house. While cleaning, I found a sealed box with these letters. At first I thought about burning them, respecting her wish to take the secret to her grave. But then I saw the news about your wife, about the baby, and I knew Priscilla was working here." "How did you know that?" "She always keeps us informed. My sister is extremely loyal to her family." George meticulously organized the documents. "I realized that fate had brought you two together in some mysterious way. That perhaps it was time for the truth, however painful it might be." Roderick walked to the bar and poured 2 shots of whiskey. He offered one to George, who accepted with a nod. "I believe this revelation brings more questions than answers," George commented after a sip. "What do you intend to do now, Mr. Vance?" The question hung in the air as Roderick stared at the garden through the window. He could see Priscilla's silhouette sitting on one of the stone benches, illuminated by the moonlight. His sister, his own blood, the person who unknowingly had brought life back to his home, to his son, to his hardened heart. "First, I need to verify. DNA tests validate the authenticity of the letters." "Understandable," George nodded. "I'd do the same in your place." "But regardless of the results," Roderick continued, surprising himself, "Priscilla has earned her place in this house on her own merit, for the good she has done for Raphael, and for the good she has done for me too." That night stretched into the early hours. After George left, Roderick found Priscilla still in the garden, curled up like a lost child. "Everything I believed about my life was a lie," she whispered when he approached. "Not everything," Roderick replied, sitting beside her. "Your mother loved you deeply, and my father, our father, did too in his own way." Priscilla looked at him, her eyes red from crying. "How can you be so calm? I just entered your life as an employee, and now I appear as a half-sister you never knew existed. Aren't you furious? Outraged?" Roderick reflected before answering. "I'm confused, shocked, perhaps a little betrayed by my father's secrets, but furious with you? No. You are as much a victim of this story as I am." A comfortable silence settled between them. 2 strangers united by newly discovered blood ties, trying to comprehend the new emotional territory opening before them. "What happens now?" Priscilla finally asked. "Now," Roderick sighed, "we begin to reconstruct our stories based on the truth, however painful it may be." The next morning, Raphael woke up with a high fever. His little face was red, his small body shaking with chills. The pediatrician, called in a hurry, diagnosed a common viral infection in children of that age. "It's not serious, but he'll need constant care for the next few days," the doctor explained. "Keep him hydrated and administer the antipyretic every 6 hours." That momentary emergency pushed the previous night's revelation into the background. Roderick and Priscilla, united by concern for Raphael, took turns monitoring his fever, offering water, and comforting the restless baby. On the third night of vigil, with Raphael finally sleeping peacefully after the fever subsided, Roderick found Priscilla in the kitchen preparing tea. "You should rest," he suggested, noticing the deep dark circles under her eyes. "I can keep an eye on him for a few hours." "I'm fine," she replied, though exhaustion was evident in her every movement. "I'm used to sleepless nights at the hospital." Roderick poured himself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, a space he rarely entered before Priscilla's arrival. "I received the preliminary DNA test results today," he commented, carefully observing her reaction. Priscilla stopped stirring her tea. "And? 99.8% probability that we are paternal half-siblings." Roderick calmly took a sip of tea. "Not that I needed a paper to confirm. Our stubbornness is practically identical." A reluctant smile appeared on Priscilla's face, the first since the revelation. "Stubborn, me? You're the intransigent one. Exactly like our father." The deliberate mention of our father broke an invisible barrier. Priscilla sat opposite him, her hands clasping the warm cup as if seeking strength there. "It's strange to think that I grew up admiring Augustus Vance from a distance, without knowing he was my biological father," she reflected. "Mom always spoke of him with so much respect. Now I understand why." "He would be proud of the woman you've become," Roderick stated with surprising sincerity. Educated, independent, principled, with a huge heart for Raphael. "Thank you," she hesitated before continuing. "Do you think we should tell your mother? She's still alive, isn't she?" Roderick stiffened visibly. "Mrs. Eleanor has lived in London for years. She withdrew from everything after my father's passing. Her health is fragile. I don't know if she could handle this revelation." "I understand. Some truths are too heavy. Perhaps one day," Roderick checked his watch, "I'm going to check on Raphael." As he stood up, a sudden dizziness made him stumble. Priscilla rushed to steady him, holding his arm. "You're exhausted too," she noted, concerned. "When was the last time you slept properly?" "I don't remember," he admitted, feeling the warmth of her touch on his arm. A simple contact that stirred complex sensations. "Go rest, I insist. Raphael is better, and I can monitor him for a few hours." The physical proximity between them created a moment of unexpected tension. For a brief instant, something beyond their newly discovered kinship hung in the air, a connection they had felt before the revelation, and which now became forbidden. Impossible. Roderick pulled away first, breaking contact. "You're right. Thank you." As he walked to his room, a flurry of feelings assailed him. Life had played a cruel trick on him, introducing him to someone he had begun to deeply admire, only to reveal she was his sister. Fate had a peculiar sense of humor. 3 months passed since the night George Santos brought to light the secret, connecting the Vance and Santos families. Autumn gave way to Los Angeles winter, bringing misty mornings and impeccably blue afternoons. The mansion in Bel Air had undergone subtle but significant transformations. The heavy curtains that blocked natural light were replaced by lighter fabrics. Family photographs, once confined to dusty albums, now decorated the walls, and the most frequent sound in the corridors was Raphael's crystalline laughter, who had just turned 15 months old. On that Saturday morning, Roderick watched from the veranda as Priscilla taught Raphael to feed the fish in the ornamental pond. The boy, with his still unsteady legs, excitedly ran back and forth, throwing more food than necessary, causing a frantic competition among the colorful koi. "Slow down, Raffy." Priscilla laughed, trying to control her nephew's enthusiasm. "Otherwise the fishies will get fat as balls." The scene warmed Roderick's heart. In recent weeks, he had learned to redefine the concept of family. Priscilla, now officially recognized as his half-sister through legal documents, had become an indispensable presence not only for Raphael but for himself. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Renata Vance, his mother. "Darling, I'm already at the London airport. Confirm if you sent the private jet to pick me up. Roderick felt his throat dry. After weeks of reflection, he had made the difficult decision to tell his mother the truth about Priscilla. Yes, Mum. Everything is ready for your arrival. We'll be waiting at the hangar. We? Who else will greet me besides you and my grandson? Roderick took a deep breath before replying, There's someone special I want you to meet. I'll explain when you arrive. After hanging up, he walked to the garden. Priscilla immediately noticed his tense expression. Is Mrs. Eleanor really coming? Roderick nodded. She arrives tomorrow. I've decided it's time for her to know the truth. Priscilla paled slightly. Are you sure? She might not be prepared to discover her husband had a child out of wedlock. My mother is stronger than she appears. Besides, she no longer answers when I try to explain by phone. She says serious matters should be discussed in person. A nervous smile appeared on Priscilla's lips. She seems determined. Like all the women in my life, Roderick joked, momentarily easing the tension. Raphael chose that moment to stumble closer, his tiny hands full of fish food which he proudly extended to his father. Daddy, fish! Roderick picked up his son, ignoring the mess on his custom Italian shirt. That's right, champ. For the fish. The rest of that day was dedicated to preparations for Mrs. Eleanor's arrival. Staff rearranged the main guest room with the matriarch's specific preferences: Egyptian cotton sheets, fresh white flowers exclusively, French mineral water. Josephine supervised everything with military efficiency, while Priscilla kept a discreet distance, unsure of her role in the approaching new family dynamic. That night, after putting Raphael to sleep, a task Roderick now insisted on performing personally, he found Priscilla in the library, leafing through an old photo album. These are photos from the inauguration of Vance Construction's first headquarters, she explained when he approached. I found them in a box in the attic while looking for Christmas decorations. Roderick sat beside her, observing the black and white images. His father, young and determined, cutting a symbolic ribbon. His mother, elegant in a light suit, smiling proudly. It was in 1975, he commented, the beginning of the empire. And here, Priscilla pointed to a figure almost hidden in the corner of the photograph. I believe that's my mother. Still young, working the catering service at the inauguration. Roderick adjusted his glasses for a better look. Indeed, a young Antonia served canapes on a tray, her gaze discreetly directed towards Augustus Vance. That's how they met, probably, he concluded, feeling a strange mix of melancholy and curiosity. Two completely different worlds that crossed paths by chance. Priscilla closed the album carefully. Like us. The comparison hung in the air like a soap bubble, beautiful, fragile, ephemeral. Roderick cleared his throat, looking away. I have something for you, he announced, pulling an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. I was waiting for the right moment. Priscilla accepted the envelope with curiosity. Inside she found legal documents with the crest of Marcus Lane's law firm. What is this? Official post-mortem paternity recognition. You are now legally a Vance. Priscilla's eyes filled with tears. I didn't ask for this, Roderick. It was never my intention. I know, he interrupted gently. It's what's fair. What our father would have done if he had lived long enough to meet the incredible person you've become. Priscilla brought her hands to her face, trying to contain her emotion. I don't even know what to say. That's not all, Roderick continued. There are also documents guaranteeing your minority stake in the group's companies. 5% of Vance Enterprises shares are now in your name. What? She almost dropped the papers. That's millions! You are a Vance, it's your right. I can't accept, Priscilla declared, trying to return the envelope. I came to take care of Raphael, not to appropriate part of your inheritance. Our inheritance, Roderick corrected firmly. And it's non-negotiable. It's already registered. A heavy silence settled between them. Finally, Priscilla put the documents back in the envelope with trembling hands. Thank you, she whispered. I promise to honor the family name. You already have been since you arrived. The next morning, the atmosphere in the mansion was one of tense anticipation. Josephine bustled about checking the last details. The gardeners put finishing touches on the flower beds. Raphael, sensing the commotion, was more restless than usual. Priscilla opted for a discreet look, a simple cut navy dress, hair pulled back in a low bun, minimal makeup. She observed herself in the mirror, trying to see traces of Augustus Vance in her own face. The same eyes, perhaps. The shape of the chin? You look beautiful. Roderick's voice surprised her. He stood at her bedroom door, impeccable in a grey suit. Thank you, she replied, blushing slightly. I'm nervous. Me too. Mom has a peculiar temperament. Do you really think she'll accept me? Roderick took a few steps into the room, stopping at a respectful distance. She'll have to deal with many complex feelings. Anger at my father, probably. Confusion, perhaps even guilt for not having noticed. But in the end, I believe she'll see what I see, an extraordinary woman who has only brought light into this house. The sincere compliment made Priscilla's heart race in a way she had been trying to ignore in recent weeks. Since the discovery of their kinship, they had both established a tacit emotional distance, repressing any feelings that exceeded fraternal boundaries. Shall we? Roderick formally extended his arm, as if escorting a lady to a ball. We shall, she accepted the gesture, feeling the comforting warmth of his arm beneath her fingers. The drive to the airport was silent. Raphael, in his car seat in the back, played distractedly with a teddy bear. Priscilla looked out the window, watching the Los Angeles urban landscape pass in blurs of concrete and glass. Roderick kept his eyes on the road, occasionally checking on his son in the rearview mirror. At the private hangar, the Vance Enterprises jet landed promptly at 10 a.m. Roderick held Raphael in his arms, while Priscilla remained a few steps behind, like a discreet shadow. The aircraft door opened, and an elegant figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Renata Vance, at 65, maintained the impeccable posture of her modeling days. Perfectly cut grey hair in a classic bob, designer suit, discreet but visibly expensive jewelry. My son, she smiled, gracefully descending the steps. Mom, Roderick stepped forward to embrace her with Raphael in his arms. It's good to have you back. And this is my precious grandson. Renata took Raphael from her son's arms. How he's grown. The last video call doesn't do this little man justice. Raphael studied his grandmother with curiosity, then smiled shyly, clinging to her pearl necklace. Careful, Raphael, Roderick warned. Those are real pearls. Let him, Renata smiled. Pearls are meant to be worn, not kept in safes. Her gaze finally rested on Priscilla, who remained motionless like a statue. And who is this young woman? She asked with polite education, though her eyes revealed a sharp curiosity. Roderick took a deep breath. Mom, this is Priscilla, the special person I mentioned. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Vance. Priscilla extended her hand formally. Renata shook the offered hand, studying her with interest. The pleasure is mine, dear. Roderick rarely mentions special people. You must be truly extraordinary. The drive back to the mansion was filled with pleasant conversation. London, Renata's health, Raphael's progress. The crucial revelation was postponed by a silent mutual agreement between Roderick and Priscilla. Only that night, after dinner, when Raphael was already asleep and the three adults gathered in the living room for a digestive, Roderick finally broached the subject. Mom, there's something important we need to talk about, he began, sitting beside her on the sofa. I imagined, Renata commented, savoring her almond liqueur. You look like a violinist about to perform a particularly difficult piece. Roderick exchanged a look with Priscilla, who nodded encouragingly. It's about Dad and about Priscilla. The silence that followed the revelation was deafening. Renata Vance remained motionless, her liqueur glass suspended in the air, her expression frozen in a polite smile that slowly faded. Repeat that, she finally requested. Placing the glass on the side table with meticulous precision, Roderick swallowed hard. Priscilla is Dad's daughter, my half-sister. I see. Renata's voice was strangely calm. And you discovered this when? 3 months ago, Priscilla replied, her voice almost a whisper. I didn't know either, Mrs. Vance. My mother never told me. Renata stood up with studied elegance, walking to the large window overlooking the mansion's night gardens. Her silhouette against the darkness seemed fragile and at the same time imposing. Augustus and his secrets, Aunt, she murmured, more to herself than to the others. I always thought there was more he wasn't telling me. Roderick exchanged a worried glance with Priscilla. His mother's controlled reaction was more disconcerting than any emotional outburst. "Mum," he approached cautiously, "we understand if you need time to process this. It's shocking news." Renata turned to face them, her face a serene mask that revealed none of her internal thoughts. Her eyes, however, studied Priscilla with an almost painful intensity. "It's not as shocking as you imagine, my son." The declaration took both of them by surprise. "What do you mean?" Roderick asked, confused. Renata sat back down, adjusting her skirt with precise gestures. "Your father and I had a complex marriage. We loved each other deeply, but we also hurt each other over the years." She paused, composing herself. "There was a period in the early 90s when we grew apart. I was involved with my social projects, traveling constantly abroad. Augustus immersed himself in work, expanding the business. It was an unofficial separation, let's say." Roderick sat down slowly, stunned. He had never suspected problems in his parents' seemingly perfect marriage. "When we started to get closer again, I noticed changes in him," Renata continued. "An unusual generosity with certain employees. Gifts, raises, educational opportunities for their children. Particularly with a cook." "My mother," Priscilla confirmed, her voice choked. "Antonia Santos," Renata nodded. "A dignified woman, I must acknowledge. She never caused problems, never made scandals, never tried to blackmail or threaten our family." The Vance matriarch sighed deeply. "I confronted Augustus once. Not about the possible daughter, that I never knew for sure, but about the affair. He confessed, asked for forgiveness, swore it had ended even before I returned from my travels." "And you forgave him," Roderick concluded, beginning to understand the complexity of his parents' relationship. "I forgave him," Renata confirmed, a slight nostalgic smile on her lips. "I wasn't perfect either, Roderick. I had my deviations during that period of estrangement. We decided to rebuild our marriage, stronger and more honest with each other." She turned her attention to Priscilla, who remained tense as if prepared for rejection. "Come here, child." Hesitantly, Priscilla approached. Renata took her face in her hands, studying every detail with experienced eyes. "His eyes," she murmured. "And the chin. But the smile is all your mother's." To their astonishment, Renata embraced Priscilla with surprising tenderness. "Augustus would have been proud of the woman you've become," she said, her voice slightly choked. "And I'm glad that in some mysterious way, fate brought you to our family exactly when we needed you most." Priscilla couldn't hold back her tears, returning the hug with equal emotion. "Thank you for accepting me," she whispered. "Family is family." "Dear," Renata replied, pulling away to wipe a discreet tear. "Even when it arises in unexpected ways." That night something definitively changed in the Vance mansion. The last barrier fell, allowing the past to finally rest and the future to begin to be built on more solid and true foundations. In the months that followed, a new dynamic was established. Renata, who initially planned a short visit, decided to stay indefinitely in the United States. She sold her apartment in London and returned to occupy her place in the mansion, no longer as the patriarch's wife, but as the matriarch in her own right. The relationship between her and Priscilla blossomed in a surprising way. They shared a genuine love for Raphael, and furthermore discovered common interests in literature, classical music, and social work. Priscilla's experience in healthcare perfectly complemented Renata's project to build a children's hospital in a less privileged area of Los Angeles, an idea that soon became a reality with Roderick's full support. On a sunny spring afternoon, almost a year after the revelation of the family secret, Roderick watched from the terrace as Priscilla, Renata, and Raphael played in the garden. The boy, now over 2 years old, ran energetically between his grandmother and his aunt, laughing heartily. "He has his father's energy," commented Marcus, who had come to discuss the details of the company's international expansion. "And his mother's joy," Roderick added with a nostalgic smile. "Caroline would love to see him like this, surrounded by love." "You've built an incredible family, Roderick," Marcus observed. "Different, unexpected, but undeniably united." Roderick nodded, reflecting on the path traveled since those dark days after Caroline's passing. The pain still existed, probably always would, but now it was accompanied by hope, by renewal. "You know what's most ironic?" he commented. "I spent so much time distrusting everyone, installing cameras, building walls, And in the end, it was precisely the person I suspected the most who brought light back into my life. That night, after dinner, when everyone had retired, Roderick found Priscilla in the library. She was examining the silver locket, now framed in a glass box on the fireplace, along with other significant family objects. "A place of honor," he commented, approaching. "As it should be. I still wonder if Mom made the right choice by keeping the secret," Priscilla reflected. "So many lost years, so many moments we could have shared as a family." "Perhaps she feared the truth could destroy rather than unite," Roderick suggested. "The world was different back then. Judgments more severe. Even so, I'm sad our father didn't have the courage to acknowledge me publicly." Roderick placed his hand on her shoulder, a comforting gesture that had become natural between them. He did what he believed was best under those circumstances. "Our choices aren't always ideal, but we do what we can with what we have." The silence that followed was comfortable, familiar. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Roderick commented, changing the subject. "About the future." "About finding new love?" Priscilla smiled genuinely. "I'm happy to hear that. It's about time. Caroline always said that the heart has an infinite capacity to love, that one should never close the doors to new beginnings." She seemed like a very wise woman. She was, Roderick confirmed with a special twinkle in his eyes. "And I think she would approve of my choice." "And who would be the lucky lady?" Priscilla asked, curious. "Dr. Beatrice Miller, Raphael's pediatrician." Priscilla's eyes widened in surprise. "Dr. Beatrice? Since when?" "We've been talking a lot during Raphael's checkups. She invited me for coffee last week. I accepted." Roderick seemed almost shy, like a teenager. "We ended up talking for hours." "That's wonderful," Priscilla exclaimed, genuinely happy for her brother. "She's amazing. Smart, caring, grounded. And beautiful," Roderick added with an embarrassed smile. "That too," Priscilla laughed. "When do we get to meet her officially?" "I'll invite her to Raphael's birthday next month." "If all goes well by then." They were interrupted by the sound of the intercom. Both looked at each other, surprised by the call at that hour of the night. "Sir," the security guard's voice sounded over the intercom. "There's a lady here insisting on seeing Ms. Priscilla. Says it's urgent." "Who is it?" Roderick asked, concerned. "Mrs. Clarissa Oliver. Says she's Ms. Priscilla's cousin." Priscilla visibly paled. "Clarissa? Here, I haven't seen her in years, since... Roderick encouraged her to continue. "Since we fell out over my mother's inheritance." Priscilla seemed genuinely disturbed. "She wanted to sell the house immediately to split the money. I insisted we should keep the property in the family for sentimental value." "Do you want me to send her away?" Roderick offered protectively. "No," Priscilla decided after a moment of reflection. "It must be important for her to come here so late. Let her in." Minutes later, a woman approximately 40 years old entered the library. Her face showed clear signs of tension and tiredness. "Priscilla," she greeted dryly before noticing Roderick. "Excuse the intrusion, Mr. Vance. I didn't know you'd be present." "Clarissa," Priscilla stepped forward, extending her hand formally. "What brings you here so late? I found something you should see." Clarissa opened her bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope. It was hidden in a false box at the back of Aunt Antonia's wardrobe. "I only discovered it because I finally managed to sell the house, and the buyers asked to remove all the furniture." Priscilla accepted the envelope with hesitation. "What's in here?" "A letter and a test." Under the watchful eyes of Roderick and Clarissa, Priscilla carefully opened the envelope. Inside she found a handwritten sheet of paper and an old medical document. Her eyes quickly scanned the content and the color drained from her face. This can't be true," she murmured, swaying slightly. Roderick rushed to support her, guiding her to the sofa. "Priscilla, what is it? What does the letter say?" With trembling hands she handed him the paper. "My dear daughter," the text began in Antonia's delicate handwriting, "if you are reading this, it means I have passed away and fate has decided it was time to know the whole truth. Augustus Vance is not your biological father." Roderick felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "What do you mean?" "Keep reading," Priscilla urged in shock. "When I discovered I was pregnant," the letter continued, "I had already separated from the man who was truly your father, Frederick Grant, an engineer who worked at the construction company. Augustus, as my employer, noticed my desperate situation. He offered financial help and support, with one condition, that I never reveal the pregnancy to Frederick, who was married and had young children. To protect my reputation and ensure your future, Augustus allowed everyone to believe the child was his. The enclosed test, performed secretly years later, confirms the truth. Forgive me for this final secret. Everything I did was out of love for you. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Priscilla's accelerated breathing. So, we're not siblings. Roderick finally verbalized what they both thought. Apparently not, Clarissa interjected, observing their reactions with interest. I thought you should know, Priscilla, especially now that you're living in this mansion as a sister. The insinuating tone did not go unnoticed. Priscilla stood up abruptly. Thank you for bringing this, Clarissa. If you'll excuse us, we need to process this information. Of course, her cousin smiled artificially. I've done my part. The choice of what to do with this revelation is yours. After Clarissa left, Roderick and Priscilla remained silent, each absorbed in their own tumultuous thoughts. The DNA test attached to the letter, though old, was clear. Augustus Vance had 0% probability of being Priscilla's biological father. All these months, Priscilla finally spoke, her voice choked. All this story about us being siblings, about me being a Vance, all based on a lie. Not a lie, Roderick corrected gently. An act of protection. My father took care of you as if you were his daughter. In a way, you are a Vance, not by blood, but by the love he dedicated to your family. Priscilla looked up, meeting Roderick's intense gaze. What does this mean for us? She asked, verbalizing the question hanging in the air. Roderick approached slowly, taking her hands in his. It means that fate is even more mysterious than we imagined, he replied with a hesitant smile. It means that when I thought I was finding a sister, I was actually finding a friend, Priscilla suggested, her heart racing. Much more than that, Roderick finally admitted. But it also means we need time. Time to process this new truth, to rediscover who we truly are to each other, without the weight of imagined kinship. Priscilla nodded, squeezing his hands lightly. Time, she agreed. And honesty, always. That night, as the Vance mansion finally slept, two restless souls contemplated the stars from their respective rooms. The future, once so clearly defined by blood ties, now opened like a horizon of unexplored possibilities. In Raphael's room, the silver locket, now hanging above the crib like a protective talisman, shone under the moonlight streaming through the window. To Augustus Vance's inscription never seemed so true. Life always finds a way. And so, between revealed secrets and new beginnings, the Vance family discovered that the strongest bonds are not necessarily those of blood, but those forged by love, honesty, and the courage to embrace the unknown. Raphael, in his innocent sleep, smiled as if he knew he was surrounded not only by people who shared his DNA, but by souls who had chosen to love him unconditionally. And in the end, that choice, the daily decision to love despite the circumstances, was the true miracle that transformed a cold mansion into a welcoming home, a house of secrets into a sanctuary of truths.